I'd like to invite you to turn with the Bible to Matthew chapter 6 with a warning. It's kind of a tough passage. It challenges us to examine both our outward acts of righteousness and our inward motives or our inward hearts and reasons that we go to do the right things. There are three acts of righteousness that are addressed in Matthew 6. Giving, praying, and fasting. Giving to the local synagogue in Jesus' day as well as to the poor. Praying, of course, to God. And fasting, going without meals for a certain period of time to demonstrate our sincerity of our religious practice. I'm warning you because really it's religious people that are in the crosshairs of Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 6. Sometimes easy for us to sort of look out in the world around us and see that they don't outwardly practice all the things God tells us to practice. So therefore we're okay and they're not. But Jesus invites us to take a deeper look as to why we do the things that we do. And this sermon is a cousin to last week's sermon with regard to really examining our hearts and our motives. Because what's in our heart has a way of making its presence known on the surface in what we do. And wouldn't you know it, today is January 20th, and it just so happens that in your church mail folders today are envelopes that contain a thank you note as well as a summary of your 2018 church giving. Isn't this great timing? I promise, I didn't plan that. I just want you to know that this just happened. I once heard a church treasurer talk about those infamous annual reports that churches offer. Of course, they're helpful with regard to taxes and itemized deductions and so forth. There's a bottom line. Each occurrence of your giving that's been recorded, unless you chose to do so with cash or something, is recorded and then added up as a bottom line at the end. And I heard a church treasurer talk about this bottom line once. And he says, when you go to do your taxes, you want to take your charitable giving report from your church, you want to look at the bottom line, multiply it by 10, and that should equal box number 1 on your W-2. Challenge, right? Think about that. That is quite a challenge. Now, we do seal those envelopes for privacy. I don't want anybody running out in the middle of the sermon to raid the boxes and see what they can find. If your envelope's opened, let us know. We'll dust for fingerprints. I mean, I personally, as a pastor, have specifically requested not to be aware of what your giving is. And so I am not aware of that, and I don't want to be aware of that. What a burden. I sure appreciate our stewards. I sure appreciate our office administrator and the hard work that it is to put those things together. So as it stands, I guess you could say that those people and our church computer know what your bottom line is. But more so, God does. God sees everything. He sees through envelopes. But he not only sees through envelopes, he sees through our acts of righteousness and looks at the heart. I mean, I just hate to say, but the sin of vainglory is addressed in Matthew chapter 6. And that's a sin that religious folks are most likely to be guilty of. Oh, here we are. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm just preaching to the choir. But today, I'm preaching to the choir. This is us that Jesus has in view. Those who might think to sacrificially come to worship when they could be doing other things like watching football games or something like that, or business meetings during playoff games or something like that. It would be us group of folks that Jesus has in mind as he offers these words. Would you stand with me as you're able? And let's dare approach Matthew chapter 6 with all that in mind, shall we? Oh, friends, be careful. Good word. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, not if, but when, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. When you pray, don't be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray, standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward in full. When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And Matthew inserts here the Lord's Prayer, of course. When you pray, don't keep on babbling like the pagans, for they think they'll be heard because of their many words. Don't be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This, then, is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. And forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. This is so challenging, for if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. So much for babbling prayers. That's a hard one. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. Do you see Jesus looking at the heart again? And when you fast, you give when you pray, and when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do. I love these lines. For they disfigure their faces to show others they're fasting. I once heard a pastor describe how holy we think we are when we look like we're more in pain when we're doing acts of righteousness. He said, it looks like people were baptized in lemon juice. Don't disfigure your face to show other people that you're suffering. Truly, I tell you, they've already received their reward in full. When you fast, put oil on your head, wash your face, symbols of joy, so that it will not be obvious to others that you're fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. May God give us our daily bread today, his wonderful word. And may we perform for an audience of one. Amen? Please be seated. In this first month and first quarter of our new year, I'm focusing on the first book of the New Testament and walking along with many of you in reading through the Gospel of Matthew in January and tracking along with some of you in adult Sunday school class as well. We'll be looking more at the book of Matthew today. This chapter, chapter 6, really picks up from where we were last Sunday at the end of chapter 5. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And it's really very similar. It's a challenge for us to live with simplicity. It's just more simple to always tell the truth. That was the main point of last week. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, none of us have good enough memories to lie. We can't remember who we told this story to versus that story to. And it sounds like an I Love Lucy episode by the end of it. It's just easier. Jesus talks to us here about pure motives. Blessed are those who are pure of heart. And then this promise for those who have this kind of purity, they will see God. There's an integrity about that. And there's something tragic if we're just kidding ourselves, going through all the motions, hoping that others notice. That's our mixed motive. And that is, we don't even notice God in the process. We miss him. Our religion can get complicated when we're trying not only to please God, but we're busy trying to impress other people along the way. So Jesus here invites us to live a life without, I love this old church term, vainglory. That term is out of vogue. Would you agree? If you texted your friends that your pastor preached on VG, they would think I preached on video games, right? Or they think that I preached very good. Isn't that what that stands for? I can look up Urban Dictionary on Google as well. They wouldn't immediately think that he preached on vainglory. It's an old term, but I think it's a great term because it spells out the difference between what we may think of as vainglory and pride. As a definition, vainglory is excessive elation or pride over our own accomplishments, achievements, or abilities. It's boastful vanity. Oh, vanity is empty. So it's full of glory, but it's an empty glory. For whom do we do the good things that we do? Is it for our glory? Because if it's for our glory, if it's to prop up the name of Brilliant Friends Church, if it's to prop up my name or your good name, it's vain. What can we really do for the sake of the kingdom that really compares to bringing honor and praise and glory to Jesus Christ alone? For what he has done for us. We're all recipients when it comes to even giving, our most sacrificial giving. It all belongs to Jesus. You know, I think as a pastor that I have no special place in heaven. I don't think someday that I'm going to enter through the pearly gates and brag about how holy I was or what I accomplished in life. I think I'm going to get there and just fall on my face. Oh God, thank you for my salvation. Let any glory that is given for this church or ministry or my life or my family, let it go to Jesus Christ. Let it only go to him. This is the only glory, this is the only worship, this is the only praise that really, really matters. Everything else is so empty. But there's something in us that's just so human and so Pharisee. I catch myself so often. God, why did I say that to somebody? Why did I sneak that comment in so that they noticed how faithful I am? Why do I struggle in my humanness? I want my heart to be pure. I don't want boastful vanity. Vainglory is not just another word for pride. There's a big difference. They're similar in that they both involve unhealthy ego and boasting, but here's how they're different. Pride is when I live as if I don't need anyone. So I'm prideful in the fact that I'm going to do this my own way. I don't need God's help. And it's easy for us to think of others who sort of approach life that way from out of the church, right? Oh, they're living as if they can live without God. That's pride. They can have a prideful attitude toward God. But vainglory is very different. Vainglory is not our attempt to push others away. Vainglory is actually our attempt to bring others in. Vainglory doesn't say, leave me alone. Vainglory says, notice me. Vainglory says, watch me. Vainglory is disappointed when you don't notice how faithful I am. In practicing my religion, in practicing my sacrifice in front of you. If pride is fueled by independence and overconfidence, vainglory, I love dusting off this term for this reason, is fueled by codependency and underconfidence. Vainglory is essentially rooted, if you want to write this down, in insecurity. And if you want to read a wonderful chapter, a whole chapter on vainglory, I've cited a book here. It's part of a wonderful trilogy by James Bryan Smith, a Quaker, The Good and Beautiful Life. Sometimes as a church, we point a finger at the world and say they're prideful because they're living without God and trying to do it on their own. But all the while, we have this form of pride festering in our own heart. Notice me. Matthew chapter 6 calls us to live with a pure heart. This springs up from Matthew chapter 5 and verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. As you know from your Sunday school class, what Matthew is doing is he's organizing sections of Jesus' life. And this is an organized piece, Matthew 5 through 7, of the summary of Jesus' teaching here. Surely Jesus offered these things throughout his ministry, and I love how Matthew connects the dots. You won't notice God if you're too busy looking for the approval of others. What does pure in heart mean? Very simply, it means having a single motive. A pure apple, for example, is just an apple. If you eat an apple, you hope it's just an apple. You hope it's not a worm in it as well, right? You hope there's only one protein source in your bite of apple. And some people wrongly think that if you grab an apple and you inspect the outside carefully and see that there's no puncture mark where a worm could have gotten in, that there's no worm in it necessarily, that is not necessarily true. Do you know why? Because in the springtime, little blossoms, as they're opening, are just a prime place for insects to lay their eggs. Right? And you know what happens is the blossoms close up with those eggs inside, and then the fruit forms over time. Oh, and that apple is just such a beautiful incubator for those precious little lives that are forming. And they get to eat of the nourishment of the apple and share it with you. The worms from an apple generally come from the inside out. And I think that's a great picture of our hearts as well, because really, sin starts in our heart. It's not what comes from the outside in that makes us impure. It's from what comes from the inside out that makes us impure. So Jesus says, just because you have a shiny apple skin, just because things look great on the outside, and you know how to pray long prayers, and you know how to give to the poor, and you even know how to fast and so forth, that doesn't necessarily mean that the apple is not rotten from the inside out. And this is what's so difficult about it. I think a lot of people settle for a form of religion and honestly get really burnt out in trying for others just to notice them that they're good enough. It's based on insecurity. Notice me. I'm trying to achieve my way to a certain status. It's entirely different than the gospel of grace that says you don't deserve it. Jesus forgives you because of the cross. You're on the same playing field as everybody else. Let your acts of righteousness only be for God. And so, are we disappointed when other people don't notice our faithfulness? Do you find yourself dropping these subtle comments once in a while, maybe posts or emails? I hope somebody noticed how much I did or how much I gave. There's something natural in all of us that wants to be appreciated. Wouldn't you agree? I get it. I get it. But ultimately, don't we want this appreciation to go to Jesus Christ only? Integrity is such an important issue that Jesus spends this entire chapter of the Sermon on the Mount, as recorded in Matthew, on integrity. And to me, verse 16 is such a vivid picture. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do. Don't advertise your faithfulness with the pain on your face or your Facebook post. Is that in there? Don't disfigure your Facebook post to make sure everybody feels sorry for you. Something that we learn about, what could we call it, pity? I mean, really, nobody wants pity, if you think about it. Nobody does. They want you to say, I understand. They don't want you to say, I feel sorry for you. Who wants that? We have to understand that in our pain, we need to be really careful about that, the difference between people coming alongside of us and pitying over us. There's a big difference. If you want that other part, you got your reward in full. You got your attention. But don't you want something more? When you're suffering, put on the oil of gladness because of Jesus Christ. Let his joy be your strength. When you serve God, do it joyfully because you love Jesus. Don't groan and strain to make sure others know what a sacrifice it is for us. So I want to offer a truly heartwarming message by giving you 3 deworming tips for your heart. And may the fruit of our lives be pure before him. Remember 3 things, very simply. Let me offer 3 things. This is about living without somber faces. It's a challenge, don't you think? It's a challenge. 1, remember that God sees everything. I think the key repeated phrase in Matthew chapter 6 is simply this: your Father sees what's done in secret. And every time you see a repeated phrase in Scripture, you know that it's really important. And Matthew, as he's recording the teachings of Jesus, is very impressed by this, and he wants his readers to understand that. Your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. It's almost a way of saying, don't worry. Don't worry that others don't notice. Why? Because God sees it. Isn't that amazing? You can think of any act of kindness or service or something that you've done for the least of these and be reassured that God has not forgotten it. That's a big deal. I think sometimes when we think about the fact that God sees everything, we only think about, God sees me when I'm naughty. And he does. But here in Matthew 6, what's in view is to remember that Jesus sees us when we're nice. And I think that we're supposed to hold that in view. I think that we're supposed to hold on to that as we're attempting to be faithful to use our gifts in serving others and giving and doing. Remember this. Jesus sees what you're doing. He sees the good things. And I think that that's a remedy to our natural insecurity about things. How do my gifts measure up to somebody else's? Is what I can contribute and do within the church, is it as important as what somebody else contributes and does? I think it addresses that issue of insecurity, that craving of affirmation from others. Notice how faithful I am and how confident I am. God sees your faithfulness. And that's what Jesus is reminding these good religious people of over and over and over. Can I give you a homework assignment for this week? What are you going to say, right? I want to encourage you to practice 5 acts of secret service this week. 5 acts of secret service. Do 5 things that will lift someone else's burden. Any service would be great. You could do someone's laundry. You could take someone's car at lunch and wash it. You could fill someone's car with gas. You could clean someone's room. You could visit someone in a retirement home or a care center. You could drive someone to an appointment they need to get to. You could listen to someone when you know this person really has no one that listens to them. There are so many ways that you could perform this act of service. Get out and give God 5 this week. Intentional acts of kindness and sensible beauty. That's a little opposite of random act of kindness. Anyway. However, there is a catch to this assignment. Do whatever you do in secret. Find a way to be perfectly anonymous. Find a way to give in such a way that it's not possible for someone to thank you. How about that? As far as you're able, try to do this without the person you're serving knowing about it. And I'm inviting you to do it this way because I'm inviting you to do this not only because it's a good thing to do, it's a good thing to do, right? It's just a good thing to do. Giving, praying, fast, they're good things to do. Yeah, we ought to do those things. I'm offering for you to do these things particularly as a spiritual discipline. Of saying, God, let me do this as a way of checking my soul. Meet me here. Show me what's inside of my heart that I can't see. Show me what's behind the skin of what I want to impress others with. Show me what's in the core and change me from the inside out. Let my act of service truly be an act of service to you. 2, review my motives. And here, there's a wonderful way to do that. There's a wonderful way of seeing what's really in our hearts as Jesus talks about giving, as Jesus talks about praying, as Jesus talks about fasting. What he's really doing is he's inviting us to evaluate our priorities. What I get from Matthew chapter 6 is this: if you can't do your good deeds without telling someone, that is a thermostat of your heart. See how hard it is. Have fun with it. Tell God you're on an adventure. I'm not sure I could do this very well. Help me understand my motives for serving others this week. Take a look at what you give. Take a look at your prayer life. Take a look at your spiritual disciplines. Third thing we need to do is realign our priorities. You know, God's deepest desire all the way back to the Old Testament is that you and I would have no other gods before him. Think of it that way. Did you know that vainglory can be an idol? If we're really looking for other people to affirm for us what it is God's to affirm for us, we're really flirting with thou shalt have no other gods before me. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is cutting the apple open to show us what's on the inside. And I'm going to leave us alone for the next few minutes in open worship. And I love that our open worship does this. It allows you to be alone with God for a few minutes. And if the Spirit is speaking to you about any of this, I invite him to do that. How do you know what your priorities are? There are 3 tests here. 1, look at your acquisitions. If you really want to take an honest look with God about what's going on in your heart, take a look at how you use your finances. Take a look at how you use your time and money. Time and money go together. Money is just stored time. How do you use and what do you accumulate? Matthew 6 says, don't store away where rust destroys and moths eat. You know, the only equipment that gets rusty and the only clothes that moths eat are the ones that are unused. So this is all about not having too much. Oh, what a challenge for us in our culture. Oh my. Look at our acquisitions. The bottom line on the sealed envelope is a good thing to look at. Look at our anxieties. If you want to know where your heart is, examine what you worry about. And here again, I think we're being cautious about having idols in our lives. Where don't I trust Jesus to take care of this? Don't worry about today, he says. I'm going to take care of you. And then look at my ambitions. What are the things, your goals? Where are you headed? What is it that you're focused on and investing yourself in the best part of yourself in? Happy are those, blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they will see God. Let's take a few minutes in open worship to listen to what the Lord may be saying among us. Is your heart confident? Is your heart at peace and rest with only the approval of God this morning?